Welcome to Modern Sages Podcast. We have an amazing conversation for you this week. We have a guest speaker, Shawn Lerwill, and he is an astrologer, an intuitive, and a mindfulness practitioner. In this episode, we're going to dive really deep into how we can navigate life here in the modern day and how we can really find passion and power in what we do. And so we can't wait to share this amazing conversation with you. So stay tuned.
Welcome to Modern Sages Podcast.
I'm Jenn Gilbreth.
And I'm Candace Coons.
With over 25 years combined, we have delivered messages from beyond,
explored ancient healing wisdom, and integrated these profound teachings into our everyday life.
We are passionate about creating new ways of being human in the modern age by integrating the wisdom of the past with the present and coming into remembrance of who we truly are.
Are you ready to change your relationship to life itself? If the answer is yes, your journey begins now. Like always, we talk about our herb of the week, and our herb of the week this week is astragalus. This is such a wonderful herb. It's a very sturdy herb. It's a plant where you use the root of the plant. You don't use the leaves or the flowers, but you use the root. It is high in protein and vitamins and minerals. It's an adaptogen, so it helps you kind of cope or adapt to stress, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. It helps you have healthy function in the lungs. So oftentimes people will pair astragalus with other herbs that help support lung health. So if someone is coming in with a flu or has a cough, a deep mucus bronchial kind of cough, they might suggest pairing astragalus with either golden seal or echinacea to help create better support for the lungs. But it's an amazing immune system booster as well, and has been used for hundreds of years, from Native Americans to people from China to Mongolia. So it's a fantastic herb.
Cool.
Yeah, astragalus.
Yes. Such a weird name, but such a powerful herb.
It is, definitely.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, we are so happy to have you here, Shawn. I have known Shawn for years. He is a medicine man that I go to for guidance in my life. And he's so balanced, so calming, so grounding. And he has such a wonderful life story to share. And so I'm excited to get to know you better, Shawn, through this interview, because I've been coming to you, but as you know, for support and everything, that I don't really know a lot on a personal level. And so I've been looking forward to this conversation with you to get to know you better and to share with the world what a beautiful spirit you are and how wise you are with everyone. And I just know that whatever information comes through today is an alignment of the highest good of everyone listening. So welcome, Shawn.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That was such a kind introduction.
Yes. So, Shawn, would you mind just telling us a little bit about you? Kind of how you got started with
wherever you
all
would
that
like
you're
to
doing?
start. Yes.
All right. Well, I would say I got into the intuitive services somewhat reluctantly. I had years ago, I had a brain injury, a head injury, in a car accident, and as a result, I had a near-death experience as part of that experience as well, and it was pretty mind-blowing, but it was also very difficult for me because in that accident and following the brain injury, I actually had a loss of a sense of self. And I had, the memories of my life, but I had no idea who had lived it.
Wow.
And so that loss of self was very disturbing to me. And I didn't have the resources, the understanding, the pre-knowledge, or any support structure around me to kind of facilitate the benefits of not having a self. One might say, eventually, as we do, we reconstruct our way back into society. But it was a very difficult time, and because of the brain injury and the head injury, it it made it very difficult for me to create new memories. And so I was forced to kind of rely upon my intuition as just a daily tool for navigating my life.
Wow.
And I found that, how do I say, quite unexpectedly, um, those intuitive gifts um, became more developed the more self-reflection I did. Another way of saying it that I'll often tell my clients is that, intuition, psychic ability is a byproduct of self-awareness. It's actually
Oh,
not
that's
that
good.
special.
That's
Yeah.
so good. Yeah.
And the more that
Wow.
I discovered what this was, who this was, um, you know, void of any psychological uh, programming or conditioning, that psychic awareness and self-awareness and spiritual awareness just emerged very naturally. Um, but even in the few years post accident, I didn't have a clear way of integrating it, and it was um, I would call it dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see that.
Wow. I can imagine. I mean, I feel like on a collective level, we are unraveling these false concepts of identity.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so everyone is going through this massive remembrance and awakening process. But instead of having this gradual unraveling of these
Yeah.
identities, it was almost like you were just kind of thrown in, where all of a sudden it's like, I have no concept of that identity, and how do I navigate this world,
Yeah.
and be able to feel like I'm present and here and experiencing life fully,
Hmm.
when I don't know, I don't have the memory, I don't have an awareness of this separation. And so it's so interesting, because we all strive for this connection of
Mm-hmm.
oneness and unity and all of that. But at the same time, there is another side to this, where it's like, yeah, but when you have that concept of identity, it does create a feeling of being present or here, though, too, in a lot of ways. So I can see how it would be scary and ungrounding to all of a sudden just have that removed in an
Yeah.
instant, and you don't go back and forth, because so many people, as they go through this unraveling and awakening process, it's like it's like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, or they awake and they get really clear, and then they fall back asleep and go into the dream of Maya, and then they wake up. But it's kind of this waking and sleeping process. And for you, it's just like, here I am. Now, what do I do with this? And how do I navigate this life in
Yeah.
this new space of awareness?
And I would add that it wasn't for me a full blown um, enlightenment experience that stayed with me. I also had that ebb and flow of
Mm-hmm.
moving back and forth through presence and that singular state of awareness, consciousness, back to this fear-based, human-based, psychological mind-based um, conditioning. It was still a an ebb and flow, and I
Yeah.
think the more that I've become clearer in that awareness, that ebb and flow ceases to become a disturbing movement. Um, in my experience, it's furthered the invitation to vulnerability and connection.
That's powerful.
That is so powerful, because it's almost like it's like the concept you were talking about in our earlier podcast. There's nothing unholy about being human.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So even like you coming to that acceptance that it's okay to have these, you know, ups and downs of forgetting and remembering and awareness and humanness, and it's all part of this dance or this vulnerability and intimacy with creation, that it's not, it doesn't have to be perceived as bad or wrong and this is right or this is wrong. It's like if you can surrender into those waves that you experienced, you're able to I think have a more full experience here, to have
Yeah.
a more fulfilling and soul fulfilling experience here, because I truly crave that the soul just really longs for the experience. You know,
Mhm.
we never left creation, and there's nothing unholy about this journey. So it's like longing to be fully present, to fully feel, to fully experience this
Yeah.
journey. So what you're saying is, even though you lost that perception of identity,
Mhm.
you still had these times where you felt super connected into that oneness, and then other times where you went into the conditioning. So there was something inside of you that was encoded
Yeah.
within your physical experience that had that coding or encoding of humanness and all of the experiences that come with that, the conditionings
The
and all
human
of that too.
journey. Yeah.
And I might add, it wasn't just necessarily a physical conditioning, it was also a social conditioning. You know, those around us have an expectation of how we should appear and act. And when that's wiped out, you can see a visual disturbance in the loved ones around you who expect you to be a certain person, and that person's gone.
Wow. Yeah. So that is so fascinating, and it's just some takes so much courage to see that, instead of falling into the trap, which I'm sure there were days where it was really hard, and there are probably still days where it's really hard, but so after you've experienced that, how did that really help you launch into what you're doing now?
Well, I would say that at first I started, well, interestingly enough, I started as a bit of an energy worker, one might say. I was introduced to tarot. I was introduced to body work. A massage therapist for a time, and I found that putting my hands on people or getting myself in that um, physical space, melding with their energy, was how I primarily started to do that intuitive service. In fact, even when I was introduced to the tarot, I was quite skeptical. And so what I would do is I would, shuffle the cards, I would lay them out on the table, and I would leave the cards face down for the majority of the reading, and I would simply put my hands over the top of the cards. And because the client had shuffled them moments ago, I was reading their energy as an imprint on the cards, and I would do my reading, and then we would roll the cards over for a second opinion to see what was what matched, what mirrored, what did not, what felt good. And so I even that was a reluctant emergence. Um, yeah,
I feel like that's so powerful because I think that naturally with any intuitive, it's really hard. It can be really hard to trust yourself and to just trust the flow and to surrender and just allow it to happen. And so I just think that's such an incredible concept that, like, what greater way of trusting than to be like, I'm just going to go blindly
yeah.
and just try to dive in and try to help. But that's also where so much power and so much of that strength comes too. So I think that's amazing. That's absolutely incredible.
But for me, it just felt like what was most true, and I think that's been my um, my compass point, if you will, is just this element of I just want to know what's true. That path has been, leading me through the psychic and intuitive awareness through the astrologer part of me, and further on into the mindfulness practice, this evolution into that, and all three have kind of been stepping stones and paths to just that self-discovery of what is true. That was the driving force to me, and of course, courage is a part of it, but I think discovering what was most honest was a big factor as well.
I just keep visualizing in my mind since you started talking, like it just feels like ever since, you deciding, okay, I'm just going to rely on my intuition because that's all I can do. I can't remember everything, and that feeling of feeling lost. But it's cool because it's like I just keep seeing like this big giant drum. And is it okay if I share this with you? This message is coming in.
Please, yeah,
Okay.
please.
Because I just feel like there's this big giant drum, but I just feel like there's like so many generations. And it's like, it feels like you've been someone who has helped generations before, like to navigate this human journey. But it almost feels like there's this navigating like this big drum of like the ancestors who came before you, and I see it a lot on like connecting into your biological dad's side of the family. But it just feels like there's this sturdy strong drumbeat that just keeps coming. But it almost feels like you being in the space that you were, like having to reactivate your heart or having to like repurpose, restart. It almost feels like that gave more permission for all of the wisdom that's gone before to be like ignited, like deep down into like, I just see like into the root chakra. It just feels like that, like being activated. But like every time you're like moving into these new levels of learning, it's like all that wisdom that's come is like getting bigger and bigger. And it feels even like it's so natural because it feels like you were there to help them in the past. And so it's like, oh, I know this wisdom, but now it's like time to put it into the human form. And it just feels like this big cultivation of like, boom, like this pulsing of like this drum. It kind of feels like when you would think of like these Viking energies that are like really connected and moving and like supporting each other. Like,
I know I kept thinking
can't you
druids,
feel that?
druids,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like it's just that like that big pulsing energy that's like, I don't know, it just feels like your mission has activated so much of the genetics that have gone before you. And it's been very healing, but it's also like reclaiming parts of you that you never even thought you could have. And it's like they're that igniting that like those cells within your body. Does that make sense with you? Can you see it in your mind?
I can, yes. It
Okay,
was a
I'm like trying to
beautiful
describe it.
image. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like as you've been speaking, it just keeps reminding me of that. And like even the stars, like how astrology, we haven't talked about this yet, but I'm assuming that it was probably very fluid and natural. Like it was like, oh yeah, that just makes sense. And to me, I'm like, I think astrology is amazing, but like I can't even remember my sign all of the time because there's just like so detailed that it's not my purpose to dive into, but it doesn't come as naturally for me. It just feels overwhelming, where it just feels
Yeah.
like you claiming those wisdom pieces from the past is like, oh, we lived and we knew all these things, so we're going to bestow this upon you, and it's going to come so quickly and abundantly and fast, but also very strong and sturdy. Does that make sense with you?
It does. And I would say in my own life, I believe the activator was being able to sit with a master for my
Mm,
education. And I think that has been a trend for some reason in my life, that I have had the grace of communing with masters to learn skills of introspection and awareness, or even skills such as astrology. And yeah, it wasn't as fluid as one might think. There was an element of what would call it a learning curve, that was difficult but very rewarding.
That is so awesome. I know as Jen was talking about, I could just feel all this reintegration of the wisdom of your ancestors and the remembrance of your past lives and all the things and all the support that you need to pick up where you left off. It was kind of like even the masters and the teachers that have come to you, this grace that has been given to you, all planned ahead of time to be able to support you on your mission. And one of the things that we talked about before your interview is that, you really look at these tools though as a way to help people come back into remembrance of who they are. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I have a phrase in my life that I kind of live by, and I teach it to anyone who would listen. And that is, life is a setup, and you're designed to win every time. It's a setup. And so these tools, like astrology, an astrology in my opinion, this is just my limited opinion, it reveals the astrological conditioning, of the planets. And as amazing that of a tool that is, a miracle of in-depth understanding of conditioning and personality and how we show up in our life. I find that it also is like a roadmap, or if you will, an instruction for like a jeweler to notice how, source or the universe or the divine, however you want to call it, is putting pressure on different points of your astrological chart to kind of cleave you clear and clean and shape you into this, jewel that you are. And I find that it's a really fun tool that I embrace, looking at a person's chart, finding where those pressure points are and giving them the insight, of, this, this conflict with Saturn and fear. It's not just to wear you down and ruin your life and grow you up. It has a higher purpose, for you. And that way one isn't just resigned to endure what they're given, what they've been conditioned with, but I think, as we all do, attempt to transcend limitations and come back to a deeper awareness of self.
I think that's beautiful as a roadmap too. I got my astrological chart done a while ago, but I just remember she kept saying that I believe it was the ninth house is where Chiron is, and he's the wounded healer. Is that correct? Is
It's
that what it
correct.
is?
It's correct for normal astrology.
Okay.
But it was actually mistranslated.
Oh,
And
okay.
I'll tell you the differences, but I really want to hear what your ninth
Okay.
house is first.
Well, so she just kept talking about, I can't even remember the signs, but essentially what she was saying was that that's where a lot of my wounding will be taking place. But she related that a lot to spirituality and how, and part of my soul's purpose is to pull out of the darkness, or like pull out of that dark closet and spread my voice and to share and to do those things. And every time I feel like I'm getting frustrated or I'm overwhelmed or I get like overworked, the first thing that goes is my spirituality, but that's what I do for a living. And so it's just funny because she was like, you got to make sure that you're constantly aware that you will be wounded and it will affect you spiritually before anything else. And that is exactly how I am. It's a good roadmap
Wonderful.
to see that, to be like,
It
oh, okay.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most astrologers will cite Chiron as the wounded healer, but the original translation, the correct translation, is the wound heals.
I love that.
Oh,
Right?
I have
Right?
full body
That's
chills
such a
right
higher
now.
Yeah.
frequency way
Uh-huh.
to describe it, for sure.
As the Sufi poet Rumi said, pain is where the light enters you.
Mm.
Right? So
Yeah.
that Chiron, or the wound, any wound in particular, the way the way to transcend it is to go into it, to get very familiar and intimate with it, and to discover, how we are identifying as it, and that sort of thing. So
Interesting. I'm gonna definitely have to schedule an appointment with you. I
Yes, do
already wanted
it.
to, but
Yes.
yeah, that's fascinating. That just brings a different perspective of all
I
of
feel
that. It's
like
like,
too, it's
whoa,
like anytime
crazy.
you bring awareness to something too, it's like that brings you to a choice point. It's like if things are in the subconscious and you're not aware, then the opportunity to shift that energy, to change that, to rise above that isn't as strong. So that's what I love about astrology, is that like it takes it out from under there, says, just so you know, this is
yeah.
right here,
Yeah.
And how often have we, been burdened by a wound that won't stop knocking, that won't leave us alone, that seems to be orbital in our experience. It comes up and comes up and comes up, and we resist and run until we have no choice but to face it. And that very wound becomes the key to unlock a greater freedom in our life.
Mm. Yeah.
That is so beautiful. So, how do you feel like you coming into this awareness and this path has changed your relationships, like on all levels? Like when you think about your intimate relationships, your family relationships, your relationship to life. I want to hear about all these relationships.
Yeah, I would say um, in the very beginning, it really brought out um, the dysfunctional natures of my relationships. Being a fixer, being a rescuer, being a caretaker, putting myself on the hook for other people's stuff, attempting to um, acquire love and, appreciation, approval from others. That was a big part of my life, and it was a very dysfunctional part of my life. And through this um, I want to say again, sitting with the masters of personal development and mindfulness practices, seeing through that scrim of my conditioning, I would say it's changed my relationships in that I finally understand the real meaning of unconditional love. One can perceive or believe that, conceptualize it. I always thought I did, but I didn't really get it. I didn't really soul level get it, until a lot of self-awareness work. It was a learning curve, as life is. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. So, being able to feel that loss of identity and those feelings of oneness was able it was like that recognition of unconditional love in its true form.
I would say almost the witness of myself in the flash of that near death experience um, didn't translate to a cognitive understanding. And I think that's where most people get tripped up, is they
Yes.
perceive they can cognitively understand this, and they can't. It rests
Yeah.
prior to the cognitive interpretation. In fact, you'll notice this when people will get a satori moment, a shock of insight, an awareness moment, and they'll say, "I have to remember this." Right? Well, there we go again, trying to stuff the infinite into a memory.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So,
Yeah. Oh, that's
So true.
crazy.
So
So
true.
true. Yeah.
So how did that affect your work? Like how do you integrate this wisdom as you approach this world, a place that where you have to take care of your body and pay your bills and all of these different worldly things? How do you approach it from that angle? What is that like?
yeah, it's actually very, very simple. It's very, very, very simple. It's just presence. Right? My mind can run a story about, I need to pay the bills. Am I going to have enough money for blank? And what about this over here? But I notice, in order for me to connect with that, I must leave presence and enter imagination. And that very act is a lot of effort that most people aren't aware of. It's actually it takes a bit of effort. And then I have to imagine a new world, create and construct a Narnia that doesn't exist. And as a result, through some amazing somatic miracle of shamanic stuff, my body will give feedback as if that alternate reality is true. Yeah. And it's so much easier if we just stay present. It's I describe it like this. You know, when you're picking up shells on the ocean, and there is like the, I don't know, the seventh or eighth wave that comes up, and it's a little stronger than the rest. And sometimes we get caught off guard and get wet. Well, if we're present in life, those waves cease to surprise us because we become part of it. We resonate with it so that it's not some cognitive experience, it's a cooperative experience. And therefore, in presence, I'm not, if you will, trying to do something. I'm cooperating with the mystery that is doing me.
Yes. And that is a shift of awareness, because a lot of people, in the way that we've been conditioned to think, is that in order to be successful, in order to get things done, in order to rise to our highest potential, it's always in this energy of doing instead of being.
Yeah.
But when we do that, we create an element of separation within our energy consciousness. We're actually in our power the most when we are completely present in the beingness of our energy. We make better decisions. We do better work. We're better healers, teachers, leaders, when we come from that presence within us. And instead of trying to think that we always have to push or do, or to somehow figure it all out ahead of time, instead of just dealing with it in the present moment and being fully there.
And isn't that a testament? That's like a testament that life is supposed to be enjoyed. Like, it's when we're actually enjoying life, when you're present, you're able to enjoy the little things of life. But when you're in that presence, like, that's when the magic happens in life. And when we're too busy worrying and trying to get stuff done, we kind of cut that flow off. But yet we're taught so backwards, like, oh, to be successful, you have to do all these things. Society has kind of taught us that. And I feel like a lot of people, since the Aquarian age, or there's been a big shift since 2020 of people being like, hey, there's more to life than what I was living. I want to dive in, or I want to have more of a soulful purpose. But it all starts with being present. I love that. I think that's so powerful. But it just shows that when we're present, we're able to enjoy life. And we came here, yes, to experience hardship, but personally, I feel like a lot more of it was to experience joy and pleasure than we give ourselves permission to.
Yeah,
totally.
I would love to speak to that shadow aspect as well. You know, being present, it doesn't mean it's a stress-filled life. Pain and suffering, well, I should say it this way, pain and stress can enter a peaceful state. But what presence allows us to do is to realize that regardless of what's happening, I can be safe being intimate with it. You know, I have a saying that says, when you stop resisting your life, even pain becomes a miracle you don't want to miss out on.
Yeah,
that's powerful.
It shows us this breadth and this depth, so that we're not necessarily chasing happiness. We're not chasing joy. We're realizing that this experience of being includes both paradoxes, and therefore I must not be either one of those paradoxes. I'm the space that allows these two elements to come in concert, sometimes side by side at the same time.
Yes. Yes. That's
I love
so
that because, like,
powerful.
and when people are in the past or in their future, you're not here. You're not living your life. When you're not in that presence, you're not fully here. And I love what you said because it really emphasizes the sacredness of the now, of the moment, of the present moment, that you will never get this moment back. And so therefore, every moment is precious, every moment is sacred. And how that shows up in your life, like you were saying, you can allow the duality, you can allow everything in between to unconditionally love it and accept it as it is.
Yeah.
And still be functional in society and still do all the things that you need to do to, have life be what it is. But at the same time, you can have that peace and that presence through all of that energy in that space and live a happier, more peaceful life, which is what we all long for.
Yes. I think that's, this is such a good conversation. Okay, so my question to you now is, you've addressed a couple of times your mindfulness techniques and being a mindfulness practitioner. So I'm assuming that's also been able to help you find more presence in the moment, experiencing both aspects. Do you want to touch upon that a little bit for us?
Sure. I would say post head injury, post near death experience, there was this deep call. This is something I was searching for, and I'm going to date myself. This was before internet search engines were actually a thing, right? The internet existed, but you had to know the web address that you wanted to go to. And there was this thing inside of me that didn't have a word, and I was constantly searching the internet for this word that was alive in me, but yet didn't have a language that I understood or that I was familiar with. And the closest thing that came up, when it started to show up on the internet, was spirituality, right? Because I thought it was religion. I wasn't religion. I thought maybe it was Buddhism. It wasn't quite Buddhism. It was something that I didn't quite know. And then in that search, I started to connect with different theologies, theories, and practices, and things like that. And then, as luck and life would have it, again, I was able to sit down with masters, and people like the Dalai Lama and Byron Katie and Adyashanti, spending time with these individuals and asking them questions and picking their brain and things like that. It was an incredible grace to have that call answered with such skilled practitioners.
Now, was this in like the physical form or in spirit, or was it both?
Physical form.
Physical. Wow.
Form. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And it was fun to be led down the path of my own awareness with someone who is so skilled. Those multiple people. And I will also add, even dysfunctional relationships were the same masters, right? Of people whom we unintentionally or intentionally bargain our freedom with, and those perceived adversarial forces in our life also become our masters of our own education.
That is such a good way to think of this. To like the wording, you've just had so many golden nuggets that I'm like, yes, all of this, just such deep, deep, deep wisdom. And that is such a truth right there. Absolutely.
A lot of people, they don't look at their adversaries or those that challenge them as their greatest teachers. But I think everything is about shifting that perception. Change your perception, change your life. So if we all looked at our adversaries, or we all looked at those who challenge us as great teachers that we've engraced with, it definitely helps us open up our minds and our hearts to the experience so we can truly retrieve the wisdom in the best way. It's like if we are perceiving them as something that we're not safe to be around, and we're pushing away and we're closing in our heart space, then we're less likely to retrieve the diamonds of wisdom from those interactions.
Well,
So I
and
love how you brought
yeah.
that up, because I think that's key in this day and age. We're getting bombarded with so much information, so much energy through the internet and the TV and all of these different things, and people trying to discern what is truth from untruth, what is of light, what is of fear, and being able to figure out who are those energies in their lives that are centered in love, and which relationships are centered in fear. It's like all of that stuff is being dissected right now. But I think that if you can feel safe in the knowing of who you are, so you can find that peace in the chaos, and understand that, first of all, you're already that which you are seeking already, whether you are aware of this or not. Right. And creation in this world was made in a certain way. And this is one of the teachings that the Buddha taught. And then when he experienced enlightenment, he went through all this huge search of what was going to relieve suffering. And he ends up being under the Bodhi tree, and then one day realizes all is well. And actually it's perfect just the way it is. So I think that is that beingness that you're talking about, and allowing that energy to be around us, including those adversarial kinds of energies, and allowing it to be a teacher that is showing up in our reality, and looking at it from an open heart. In that way, we're able to receive that wisdom and move and integrate that energy so much quicker. I think that would be amazing for people to test and see how this works for them. Don't take our word for it, but actually try this.
Sure.
How this shifts your life.
Even just review your own history. Have not those adversarial experiences, those difficult, let's just say difficult relationships, have they not driven us to the greatest acts of self-love in our life?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, completely. And of course, we don't recognize this in the moment, but in hindsight, yes.
Yeah. Well, and I
Yes.
love even you calling them like their presence is that master energy,
teacher.
is a master teacher, because if you think about that, that brings like a whole different depth, a whole different perception of like finding respect in the journey. And it brings, to me, it just feels like it brings this different kind of energy of like, oh, okay, I know this person can help me. I know I'm learning something. But if you really sit with that, it just, to me, it's like a reminder that even if someone hurt you, or if there's a relationship that's really faltered, instead of making it bad and wrong, it's like, okay, I can write out my experience, I can write out my emotions, release that heaviness. But it's almost like when we look at the lessons learned, it helps us to pull back, like an eagle's perspective of who that person truly is. And they too are so much more than that experience. And so it almost helps you see that, yes, their soul, just like my soul, if my soul is learning lessons, if I am more than this experience, so too are they. And it almost gives you a different perspective of like, wow, they're learning these lessons, I'm learning these lessons. We can learn them together, but I can also honor their higher self instead of getting called into the muck of the world. And that doesn't mean that we don't live in the world. It's just when those times do come, when we're more present to that, it can help us pull back to say, okay, what do I need to learn? What am I learning? What's my soul experiencing? And experience the good and the bad, but also give honor to their human journey, but also give honor to their higher essence, the lessons and the master that they're here to teach us as well. It
Yeah.
just like brings a deeper integration, I feel like.
Yeah.
That's really
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah. And I think it's like when we use those experiences to become right with ourselves,
Yeah.
we can then have the intimacy and the availability to become right with others.
Mm,
It's like if I'm okay with my pain, I'm okay with your pain too. Your pain doesn't scare me, right? But if I'm not okay with my suffering, with my stuff, I will constantly be triggered.
Mhm.
It's a perfect mirror.
It totally is a perfect mirror. And
It's
that's
a,
what the universe will do. It will just keep bringing you these teachers to trigger those shadows that
yes.
we're not willing to just feel and feel safe with. And
yeah, so true.
so it's interesting. One of the things that came to my mind, I had a wonderful master teacher many years ago, and that she would ask, she would ask me when I was asking her question, what is your intention? And at the time I was like, why is she asking me like what my intention? I'm trying to be peaceful, happy, start a conversation, but there was always this questioning, like, where is this person coming from? She was very fearful of others. But at the same time, it was a wonderful teacher for me because it made me really sit with it. And at the time, I was reading the Course of Miracles, which you think about the universal divine timing and the matrix of your reality and how things will come and repeat in your mind. And that's such a core teaching. The Course of Miracles is really reflecting intention, the energies of intention behind action. And how things are really an illusion, and a forgetfulness of who we are. But she was she came into my life at the perfect time, and it really inspired me to go deeper, to recognize the observer behind the action, to really sit with my presence, with the true essence of who I am, to really feel like, where is this energy rooted? Where is it coming from inside of me? How am I making these actions in my life? Like, where is this rooted? And it was when I went through this journey with this for over a decade, just really reflecting, and it really inspired me to say, where is my energy? What energy am I bringing into a space or into a room? Where is this word rooted, or why am I taking action in this way? It made me very self-aware, and I'm so grateful for her. And it's interesting how she is not a part of my life anymore, even though I didn't make it not be that way. It's just that particular lesson that she was teaching me had a purpose and a timing, and it came in when it needed to inspire me to go deeper into my path. And at the time, it was so stressful and hard for me to be around that energy. But now I look at her, I'm like, she was a master teacher. She was a master teacher for me. And I'm truly grateful.
Yeah.
So I just love this conversation, Shawn. And what I love too about the conversation is, like, we were going to talk about mindfulness tools. And you're like, well, what are these mindfulness practices? And I feel like you've taken us on a journey of what that means when it's integrated into your everyday life and experience, because so many people, including myself, we talk about tools of mindfulness and like the breath and coming in awareness of the five senses and then beginning your meditation practices in this mindfulness place. But taking that energy and integrating it
Yeah.
into presence and mindfulness in everyday life. I love how you have really opened the door to that for us and for the listeners. It means so much to me, and I thank you for your wisdom, Shawn. You're just such a blessing in my life. Thank you so much.
I'm humbled to be such a reflection. Thank you.
Well, and you
It's
can
an
just
honor.
tell that you are so humble about what you've experienced, is that it's not you. You're just like a facet of this amazing wisdom and knowledge and this ebb and flow of truth. And you can really feel that humility, which I think is so beautiful too. It just shows there's you're living a purpose much higher than your own human mind is focused on. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like surrender and trust. And it's such a good example of, just when we do live in that space. And of course, I know you're probably thinking I'm not perfect at it, but at the same time, it's like, it's such a good lesson and such a good example that it is possible for us to live a very present and a very mindful space, but we do make such great impact on people when we're able to do that for ourselves, but then we're able to meet people and be an influence and influence other people in ways that we couldn't even comprehend. And it all starts with that power of mindfulness to become more present and then to really focus on seeing things from a higher perspective and just allowing those experiences to lead you for positive versus to hold you back.
Yeah. And I would also add that it's safe to be present. Most of us don't think it's safe to be present. And interestingly enough, when we lose that mind identified perspective, or at least put it aside for a moment, that intimate presence is so natural. But from the mind's point of view, it's not a safe space, and I think sometimes our psychological mind, our personalities, have a sense of self-preservation because they know in moments of presence they'll vanish, and we tend to not realize just how often this happens throughout the day. When we see the sunrise, or we smell a beautiful flower, when the cat jumps onto the bed, or there's a beautiful flock of birds that fly over, are we not struck still? Are we not just present in that moment where there's no thinking, there's no self-identification? Are we not just perfectly at oneness with that experience?
I love that, because that really brings up how attached we are to those false identities and ideas. And like even the self-preservation, what would you want to preserve? What is that? Who is the one who's wanting the self-preservation? So it's like being able to just dissolve and not be attached to identity and be fully present in that oneness is, I feel, where our future is going. And this whole new experience that we are being invited into, while being human. I feel like this is the invitation. How you describe this, I feel like this is the invitation for all of us, and on a very conscious level. So I'm excited for our future. And I'm so grateful that you are a way shower of how this looks, because a lot of it's like, well, how does that look? Like, what does that mean? It's like you being able to really break that down. The sunrise, the cat jumping on the bed, it's like, it doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to have X, Y, and Z. It's just really about being here, and just releasing all of our attachments, to what this means or that means about me, and who is the me that we're referring to.
Right.
And even investigating our attachments, that's to release them, they'll just come knocking again, right? But when we put the face of our honesty and our truth and our awareness onto that experience and onto that attachment, onto that self-identification, we see it for what it is and we stop running.
Yes. Amen. Woohoo! I love it.
So powerful.
I love it.
So Shawn, as we've had this amazing conversation, you've shared such great wisdom and golden nuggets. How can people get a hold of you, and what do you offer for people to work with you on?
Probably one of the easiest ways, if you don't already have my phone number, is my website, psychicshawn.com. I was able to find that one. So Shawn with a W.
Awesome.
Shawn.com is it, and it has a scheduling platform and a payment platform that is still working at the kinks. I'm not the best at the website stuff as other people are, but it's that learning curve, I suppose. But they can do scheduling for a tarot reading or an intuitive reading, various types of astrological readings, whether they be relationship readings, compatibility readings, or choosing a date for their marriage, or perhaps just a natal chart. But one of the key features that is available on that website is scheduling a transcendent chart, an astrological transcendent chart, where we, ideally, if one has a working knowledge of their astrology, if they've had a natal chart done before, we can take those things that they're already very familiar with, that are important and valid and reflected in their life, and give them specific tools on how to transcend that conditioning.
Wow.
And I also do mindfulness facilitation, but that is not schedulable on the website. Just contact me personally for that. But I have like an 8-week intensive course where we go through your life in depth, one-on-one, and start to give real progressive steps for this sort of mindfulness practice and insight tools.
Wow, that's amazing.
Beautiful. That's awesome. So we hope that you enjoy this episode of Modern Sages podcast, and click on the link below to contact Shawn Lerwill. He is such a wonderful, gifted healer and teacher. We hope that you take some of his tools to heart, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for watching Modern Sages. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
We are so grateful for your support. If you want to follow us, we have an Instagram account as well as on Facebook. We have our podcast, which is the Modern Sages podcast as well.
And we are so excited to launch our Gifts of Spirit classes in our Modern Sages Mystery School.
Absolutely. Oh, we're so excited. So we're going to link the information below in the show notes for more information about our mystery school.